welcome.
Thank you so much.
Most important part of the podcast is, do you like high protein recovery milk?
Of course I do.
So this is a strawberry flavor.
Okay, awesome.
You feel free, if you want more,
Okay.
you're welcome to take more.
Okay.
I'm very excited to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's start off with, what is the most embarrassing thing that's happened on a run?
Oh, my word. Okay, so I was thinking about this, and obviously I've had lots of experiences on the trails, having ran for the past 7 or so years or 5 years. But I was remembering back to the time my husband and I went to the Drakensberg, and it was his first 100-miler, and I was just going to crew him. And we arrived, and the sky was all stormy and cloudy, but it was off in the distance. And I was like, it's fine. I'm just going to go do a quick run, brought nothing with me.
Yeah.
I think I did have a rain jacket, luckily, but nothing in terms of safety kit, you know? And this is the beauty of trail running, right? We're out in the elements. We get to experience nature in all her glory.
Yeah.
And my husband's just like, well, do you really think you should go? And I'm like, I'm free. We're in the Drakensberg. I can run alone. I feel less concerned about safety. And I head off into the mountain, and they told me, no, just make sure you turn right. And I'm running, and I'm like, where's this right-hand turn? And then I'm going up another mountain peak, and I'm like, I think I missed the right-hand turn.
Yeah.
But now the sky's black.
Oh, no.
It's just pitch black, and I'm like, I'm about to be in the worst thunderstorm of my life.
Yeah.
So I start going towards the edge of the mountain. I'm on a table. It's like a mini table mountain. And I find this little cave, right? And the second I get into this cave, the sky just opens up. It is hailing like this big, proper hail.
Yeah.
And I'm just curled up in this little cave, because now it's fetal position in this cave. It's not a big cave. And I'm like, okay, so... And for some reason, I managed to have a little bit of service there. So I call my husband, and he's like, okay, do you have your headlamp with you? Do you have your space blanket with you? And it's about 5 o'clock. So in the Drakensberg at that time of the year, it gets dark pretty early. And I'm like, no, I don't have any of this. And he's just like, I told you not to go on this run. Yeah. And me being strong and kind of independent and wanting to do what I want to do, I'm like, I'll be fine. But then in the end, obviously, I'm in this cave calling him oh!
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you're going to have to get yourself down.
Yeah.
And oh my word. So lightning is striking in this field, and I'm just in the cave waiting, hoping that this is going to pass. I think about 20 minutes I'm sitting in this cave. And then eventually the storm kind of passes off to the side a bit. So I'm like, all right, now's your chance. Just get up, run, run, run. And I have to make it all the way back across this flat mountain where I'm the tallest thing. There's no trees. There's nothing. Yes. And I am sprinting. I swear to God, I got PBs the whole way. I probably got a crown on the top of that mountain or something like that. And eventually I made it down, and I was just I was honestly at one stage when I was sprinting across the field, I was like, maybe I should just lay down and get in the fetal position so I can catch my breath. Yeah. But then the lightning was crashing, and so I survived. But I think it was obviously embarrassing from the perspective of, my husband was like, told you so, you shouldn't have done this, but also a lesson and the reminder of, obviously, trail running is a wild sport. Yeah. It's so beautiful in that way, but we do need to be cautious and remember that we're running in the elements, and Mother Nature does what she wants to do when she wants to do it. Yeah. And it's out of our control. So it gives you a bit of, a bit of, hardens you up a bit.
Yeah. So I did a bit of research, and I obviously I've known you for a while, but I wanted to hear from you, who is Erica Mohr-Holland?
Yeah, so originally I'm Erica from America. Some people call me that. But on Instagram, I'm African Queenie, so people call me the Trail Queen. But yes, I would say my identity as a human being, I have a master's degree in public health. I work for the city of Cape Town as an epidemiologist. I'm an advocate. I work for I volunteer for an NGO called TB Proof. So I really like to get involved in social justice causes and promoting access to equitable healthcare, but also promoting access to equitable spaces. I'm a dog lover, animal lover. My coworkers used to call me Mama Kanonja, which means mother of the dog.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I have 3 dogs. I had a horse, so big animal lover, and obviously trail runner. So a big part of my identity is also being outside in the wild, in the nature. Not only trail running, but also doing hikes and things like that. So this past December, we were in Patagonia trekking for about 10 days, which was also amazing. So I guess I'm relatively well-rounded in ways. Lover of nature, lover of fighting for social justice causes, and trying to create some change in the world.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And tell me a bit about how you kind of got started in trail running and how has that kind of evolved over the past, you said 5-7 years.
Yeah. So, definitely. Initially, I was more of a hiker. And then I would just go to the gym every morning before work. And I thought I was, really fit. And I was like, oh, look at me. I'm lifting weights. I'm super strong. And then I met my husband. Well, at the time, my boyfriend before we got married. And he was into trail running. So he's like, come check out some trail runs with me. And then I would do kind of the occasional weekend run. And I was like, like in the mountains, this is super hard. Definitely harder than, a prom run. Yeah. And so I was like, I don't know if this is really for me. And we'd kind of get into a few little arguments here and there. And then he was obviously much faster than me. So I'd be like struggling all over the technical terrain and he'd just be trotting off. And I'm like, this is so annoying. This isn't fun. Yeah. And then something just shifted. And I started running with a group called Trail and Tar when I moved out to the Deep South. So I live in Capri now. And Trail and Tar was based in Tokai. So I started doing trail runs with them. But they're a bit of a hybrid road trail group. So it was kind of a nice segue into more trail running. And then by running with people that were a bit better than me, it forces you to adapt and grow as a runner. So I think that's always been a nice thing about having the opportunity to run in groups because you can progress naturally as a runner. You start off in maybe a slower group and then as you get stronger, you move up and having people to chase kind of gives you that target. So I started running with them and I was like, well, gosh, okay, this is getting easier. And once you kind of reach that threshold where you're no longer suffering all the time and you're starting to have more fun and less suffering. So more fun than suffering, you realize, okay, this is really amazing. And then obviously, being involved in the trail community, as you know, being a trail runner in Cape Town is just, it's epic. There's so many different people and they're doing different runs and there's different events that you can join in, races, events. So it's a really amazing community to be a part of. So I think after that point, that was about 2017. By 2018, I started entering some of my first races. And then it was like, oh, I'm addicted now. Like I am hooked. I'm hooked. And I think also I'm the type of person that does like setting goals and seeing myself progress and become better at something. So it became kind of feeding that competitive itch, but also a really amazing way to be a part of a community and also try to inspire other women as well to get involved in the sport and believe in themselves and really see what we are capable of as women. So that's been also really amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. And, how do you kind of balance trail running, hiking, adventures, and having a full-time job? How does that kind of work?
Yeah. It's always a difficult thing. I think it's really comes down to establishing really good routines. I would say I'm a pretty regimented person. So, I guess it depends on your personality. If you struggle to get into a routine more, it can be a bit harder. But, I'll oftentimes just build it into my routine that, okay, I'm waking up. Before work, I'm doing a run, then I'm going to work. I must say I do get to work from home, so that has a lot of the time. So that has made it easier because there's less traveling time. So obviously everyone's circumstances are different. If you have to travel into an office and you have to wake up at 6 to do that, it becomes a bit harder to run in the mornings. But then maybe you can establish a routine where you do evening runs or you kind of modify your schedule a little bit around that. But I think just establishing that routine, having good, health overall, trying to eat healthy, trying to sleep well, not drink too much alcohol. All of that kind of contributes towards having a healthier lifestyle and a better outlook. And I think at the end of the day, just that conviction and commitment, I do see myself wanting to get better. So it is something that if I don't go for a run, I feel like I haven't achieved what I want to in a day. Even holding, I do have a coach. So obviously my coach holds me accountable, but I hold myself accountable as well. I have an inner kind of thing that where if I don't do what I'm supposed to do for that day, I'm like, ooh, gosh, no, you failed. And I don't like feeling that way. So,
Sure. I mean, we are here today. I think for me, a bit of context, like I'm a newbie trail runner. And I think for me, being a male in the sport, I think for me, it's had its challenges, but I think, it's been relatively easy. Like even last night, I went for a trail run at like 8 o'clock at night on Lion's Head. So I think for me, being in that kind of position, like, and looking out, it's quite a privileged position. And that's why I wanted you to come in today to kind of like talk about, women in trail running, but also kind of getting into trail running as a woman and what that's kind of like. And I think for me, it is like the big thing is kind of let's talk about periods. Yeah. Like that's the, that is, like I think from a outside looking in, I'm like, how does that how does that work, And I think so let's dive in right there. And I think from the physical and, the mental just let's go through it.
For sure. Thank you so much for creating this space to have this discussion. I think it's really needed, and I don't think it's discussed enough in the various different forums that surround us. It's obviously something every woman goes through, and women's bodies are absolutely incredible. I mean, the fact that we can go through this sort of physical pain, because there is pain associated with having a period, emotional, it has an impact on our emotional state. The fact that women's bodies can give birth to a child and recover, I mean, it's amazing. I haven't had a child myself, but the female body and the female anatomy is really incredible. And the fact that we can still engage in competitive sports, in comparison to men who don't go through any of these things that we go through and still perform and do super well is so amazing. So I think, obviously having the conversations around the periods is so important. I mean, for me personally, I know that everybody's period differs. We experience it differently as women. Some women have very consistent symptoms associated with their periods. Other women have hardly any symptoms. Sometimes the symptoms fluctuate. I think for me personally, I'm kind of in a space where I never know what I'm going to get. So sometimes I have a lot of pain. Sometimes it's quite excruciating. Other times I hardly feel anything. I definitely get a bit of PMS, and that can affect your mental state. So I think, when you're running, obviously, if you're in a bad mental state already, you have to find more inner motivation to come through that and re-encourage yourself and tell yourself you can do this, because, sometimes the mental anguish can differ. Sometimes it's more of just an agitation. Other times you're feeling a bit down. And so I think, as a woman, it's obviously important to get to know your body. And when you're having your period, it is also important to see what your body's capable of, right? Be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself as well. There's obviously pushing the limits and, trying to see what we're capable of. And that's great. But sometimes our bodies also don't show up, and it's okay. It happens, I ran the George Mutt 100K on my period. And everything went pretty well, but I was also several days into my period, so it was lighter at that stage. I was feeling a lot better. A lot of the emotional insecurity had passed. So I was feeling pretty good, and I had a good support crew that I could say, okay, cool, here's my tampons in my race box. I'm going to need to change my tampon at this aid station. Communicated with them over WhatsApp as I was running. Okay, get the tampons ready. Next one, I need to change it, but I think also it's quite interesting, the observation that I've had around partaking in multiple races is that the races don't always take into account women's needs and cater for them, right?
Yeah.
So one race that stood out to me, which had a specific kind of package for women in our prize pack, was African X. They had these little heat pads that we could put on our stomachs if you're having your period to help, kind of, it's like a heat pack. So obviously if you have sore muscles, you can use it, but also this was one specific for periods. And I was like, wow, somebody thought of me. And it's not me specifically, obviously it's someone thought of women. Yeah. But that was a really nice little addition. But, it brings me to the point of, why don't all races have, specific, sanitary products available for women? I mean, obviously, sometimes you're doing races and there's not even a bathroom. And okay, obviously, if you need to use it for other things as well, you're now in nature, you need to find a bush, go there, do that. But, it would be kind of, I think, appropriate for race organizers as well to take those considerations into play and provide women with the sanitary products that they need to foster success on the race, So I think generally, though, aside from partaking in race events, I think also it's really important that we as women, like I was saying, get to know our bodies and then figure out what we are capable of. So obviously, as with anything, you train, you practice, right? Yeah. So you never know. On race day or on a day that you go out to do, I don't know, just any challenge you might be interested in doing, you might have your period. And so obviously putting yourself through the practice and establishing those routines and figuring out, okay, what works for you while you have your period is really important. I try to avoid when I'm racing taking pain mitigation medication because generally that's not good on top of all the other things you need to keep track of. And if you're taking too much pain medication, you might not notice if something else is going wrong with your body.
Yeah.
Timing can be key as well. I mean, look, UTCT for me didn't go so well. I DNF'd on that race and I actually didn't even think about it, but the day after I got my period, and sometimes as well, I know the day before my period, I feel awful. Yeah. I just feel flat, like I have no energy. So at the time, I was being quite hard on myself around my DNF, and I think there's a multitude of factors that fed into that aside from just the period. But the next day when I got my period, I was like, oh, okay, this kind of makes a little more sense as well. So it's getting to know your body, getting to know kind of how you're feeling pre and during and right post your period, because different women can kind of hit highs at different times. And then establishing that routine, practicing, getting used to running when you have your period. I guess it builds some form of stamina and, prepares you for the pain cave in other ways.
Yeah. I guess
if you're running when you feel like somebody's ripping your ovaries out, maybe you can run when you also feel like you're dying in other ways, because ultra running brings out, fantastic forms of pain in different moments. But I think it also helps us to build that mental endurance and stamina as well. But like I said, balance it. Don't push yourself when it's not good for you. And that's why it's really good to have intimacy with your body and understand what's going on with your body.
And what advice would you kind of, give to women who are kind of getting into trail running and, are concerned about this type of thing?
Yeah, I think just generally having a good support crew and getting to know other women that are more experienced in the support can also help you. My coach at the moment is a woman. I'm training with Vert and Dirt, Taryn Vandenkirk. And, we don't specifically maybe have a discussion about my period all the time, but we do log it when I have it on training peaks, so we can also understand how, my metrics and my heart rate and all of my different parameters that Training Peaks takes into account, how that might impact my performance. I think, having other women in the community that can guide you and help you in that sense is good. I think, we doubt ourselves a lot. And so maybe we automatically assume because I have my period, I can't run. And again, it can be very individualized because the amount of pain and physical pain that you might experience could differ per individual. But, you can you can figure that out for yourself, right? So just try to see what you're capable of. And if you know, okay, the day before my period, I feel really flat, maybe give yourself a day off. Maybe structure your routine so that that's your rest day. Or, maybe you need a couple days. Or do a lighter form of exercise. Don't go out and try to push yourself to your max on the day that you know that you're not going to be feeling great. And so obviously, like I said, sometimes, your race might be around that time. And I think for those cases, it's just also having that personal insight and knowing, okay, maybe I'm going to take it a bit easier in these segments, or push in areas where capitalize on your strengths. Don't try to push in areas where you're already not as strong, and give yourself some grace in that respect.
Yeah. And in terms of like races and stuff, obviously those are the kind of things you can't plan. So like, how do you kind of deal with that? And, like, as you said, like with the DNF, and how do you kind of deal with deciding whether to run or not? And then kind of, like deciding at what point it's like, I need to like pull out type thing.
Yeah. Look, I guess this DNF was my first ever, so it was very hard, I think, mentally, because, I am the type of person that I want to push and I want to test myself and I want to achieve. And I feel like, okay, if I decide to pull out now, I'm failing myself. Obviously everyone else around you is like, you did amazing. You ran 58 Ks. That's great. And I'm like, oh, I didn't do the whole 100, But you also need to kind of think, what are your longer term goals? If you're having a lot of pain, mine at the time I didn't think was period associated. I was cramping. I had full body cramps for about 38 Ks. Which again, I think was a combination of things. But then the next day I got my period and I was like, oh, maybe that just contributed to the overall terrible feeling that I had. But I think, as you get to know yourself more with your running, I think you reach a threshold where you're like, all right, am I doing this just for the sake of finishing this? Yeah. Or am I doing this to prove a point? Or is it worth it at this stage? Because you're in so much pain and you maybe are compromising. You're compromising your physical health over your mental health, and so, what you might gain mentally from completing the race and being like, yes, I finished. But then if you want to run another race in 3 months' time, or just generally be able to go out and run pain-free and not have complications associated with having pushed too hard, I think that's kind of where I tried to measure myself and balance myself. And I was at that stage, having already ran for 38 Ks with extreme cramps, feeling very ill, feeling very nauseous. I look back at photos of myself and I was like, white, and my face was all drawn in. And yes, like everybody goes through a pain cave on a race. Maybe I wasn't strong enough, but you can't, no regrets. I think I made the right decision for myself. I pushed myself hard. And in the end, it was 58 Ks, and it was really amazing that I could complete that, given how I felt. And I could carry on and run the next week, and I was okay. And I could go on my holiday to go to Chile and hike in Patagonia. So the future plans weren't compromised because I decided to push when my body was saying no. And I think as you become more experienced in trail running, you do realize it's okay. You have to listen to your body sometimes. So I think for us as women, it's really important that we do take that into consideration. And, it's always the balance of various things. We have the pain that male athletes experience, and then we have our pain associated with our periods and our emotional, obviously the emotional side effects that you get associated with the period, and then just kind of like the logistics of organizing. So obviously, if you're running on your own, it's a bit easier because you can be like, oh, I've got my tampons or I've got sanitary pads, but again, I do think it would be great if races did cater for that for women and provide more options around female hygiene in races.
Yeah. And talk a bit about the kind of the emotional side, the mental side, the kind of stigma and that type of, non-physical stuff, I guess.
Oh, yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. Initially, I was thinking, a lot of times when people talk about periods, it's like, you got to like whisper and it's, there's so much stigma and taboo. Women can't openly talk about what's actually going on with their bodies when it's a natural thing. I mean, this is how we're able to reproduce. This is why we're all here, right?
Yeah.
So us going through a menstrual cycle. And so I think obviously the more we talk about it, the more visibility we give it and the more we normalize it, right?
Yeah.
So it's about educating people and it's normal, I know I've heard stories of women who have completed races and, they leaked, right? So, and then it's like, oh my God, like cover it up. And it shouldn't be like that, right? Because it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might have a heavier flow than other times. And you still try to mitigate that, obviously, but if it happens, it happens. And there shouldn't be, so much stigma placed on women. She's the girl who had a leaky period or something like that. It's obviously not uplifting for women, and it also doesn't create a comfortable situation for somebody. So the more we can talk about it, the more we normalize that, which it is so normal. Yeah. But I think, it'll help also with just the emotional acceptance of having a period, because sometimes, I know, like when I'm about to get my period, I'm like, why? Yeah. Why am I getting my period again? I did have a Mirena for about 5 years and I didn't get a period for 5 years. And that was amazing because there is logistical admin associated with having a period. But then emotionally as well, you can really sometimes start getting a bit self-doubty and just feeling a bit insecure. So I think when it comes to that time and you're having those emotions, especially if you have a race coming up and you're already like nervous, it can further perpetuate those nerves. It can further perpetuate your self-doubt. So I think it's always a thing of, again, kind of just believing in yourself and telling yourself, okay, like realistically, let's be theoretical here. Like, I know I've put in all the right training. I know I've done what I can do to prepare. Yes, having a period at this time is not great for my race, maybe because it's going to be the added pain, but it's out of my control. And I have done a lot of things in preparation for this and just, continually talking yourself through that. And, if you have friends that you train with or a coach, they can also help you to kind of, emotionally work through that, I think. But I think it's just important not to let those self-doubt ideas creep in. And I have had a few conversations with friends before where they say, oh, I'm feeling a bit down and worried. And, and obviously having other people to talk to about it and uplift you and, help you to emotionally kind of get through that is important.
Sure. And I mean, like, when you say you're talking about, MUT and, so when you get to, I don't know, like the 20th hour of the race and, you've gone through this all, like, how do you kind of push on, through that?
Yeah. I think just generally with ultra running for me personally, you go through so many different stages on your race, right? And I think on that race for me, I was actually in a bit more of a low at 30Ks. And actually, shame, there was a guy running behind me. And I've seen him since in Cape Town multiple times. And he's a really nice person. We're like friends now when we chat. But at the time, I was just like, I just want to be left alone. And I was just kind of like in my zone and, just trying to focus on the race. And I was just not in a chatty mode. But then if you caught me about 60Ks later, or maybe, another 30Ks, so 60Ks in, I was like, woo, I'm good. I'm so happy. So I think there's always going to be those highs and lows and moments where you're feeling more pain versus less pain. And I always try to break my race up into smaller intervals or between aid stations. And also, I mean, like if you're planning with your period as well, that's then very important to kind of look at your aid stations and structure. Okay, I know I could get supported aid here from my crew, so I can change my tampon here and here, so you have those logistics in place. And like I said, I had my box and I had labeled everything for my support team. But I think always kind of separating your race into your aid stations and then having a plan for each one of those aid stations, kind of pre-calculated plan. Of course, sometimes things don't go to plan. On a recent race, I had told my friends, give me this, but then they didn't get my message. And then they were driving down the road to give me the items because I was like, I got there. Is this regular water? No. Well, they said yes. And then I drank it and I was like, it's got tailwind in it. I need regular water. But I think obviously preparation is key. And the more you know yourself and the more you can prepare, it helps. So as a woman, obviously then, in addition, preparing for when you're going to need sanitary products during your race at those aid stations and having people on your crew that you can talk to and say, look, okay, actually, the plan has changed. I actually need the tampon now and not at the third aid station,
Sure. And talk to me, I mean, I think safety is kind of a big thing, and especially with trail running, South Africa, like talk to me a bit about that and obviously how you mitigate it and kind of what are the fears, around that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have a lot of we've got a femicide epidemic in South Africa. Violence and rape against women is insane. It's really, really sad. And so obviously as a woman running alone, it's such an amazing thing, right? Running alone is so freeing and, you can really get into a zone. And for me, that's kind of almost like meditative. But then again, here, you kind of always have in the back of your head, okay, am I going to run into somebody around the bush and what could they try to do to me, Are they going to have a rock? Are they going to hit me over the head? Are they going to have a knife? Are they going to have a gun? And unfortunately, that is the reality, and I wish it could be different. Look, with that said, I do run alone sometimes, and I calculate where I'm going to run alone quite carefully on the basis of where I run and having observed those trails quite frequently and knowing the crime stats, knowing where there's hot spots and just kind of, you're always taking a risk, I suppose. I mean, you're taking a risk from a safety perspective anyways, because if you fall and you break your ankle, you're alone. But I think things that can help if, and in all fairness, I mean, some women are not comfortable to run alone, and that's totally fair. And I think it also depends on where you live, right? Yeah. I wouldn't go run on Lion's Head alone, even though there's so many people there. And like you said, you ran there the other night at 8 by yourself. But, knowing that there's been so much crime there recently, I'd be like, I'm going to avoid that area. Where I live in the Deep South, there's quite a few pretty quiet trails where not a lot has happened. So I feel relatively safe going there alone. But that's obviously a judgment call that I make. So I guess, luckily there are a lot of trail groups that you can join. And I run with the Musenberg Trail Dogs, for example, and I'm one of the leaders. I volunteered to help out. So basically I assist with the medium or the speedium group and lead the groups. And sometimes we have a lot of people and sometimes we have smaller groups. But that's a really great way for people to get exposure to the trail community, learn more about the trails as well. Because once you get to know kind of, okay, these are the safer trails versus I would avoid those trails, then you can make that measured decision for yourself as a woman. But I think also through running with groups, you get to meet a lot of other people. So then you can obviously have more options in terms of having breakaway groups or coordinating logistics with people on weekends to organize a run so that you're not having to run alone. Yeah. And as I mentioned, I have 3 dogs. So two of them run with me a lot. So I also feel like, for me personally, that is a bit of a safety measure because I know that people are sometimes a bit scared of dogs or more hesitant to attack somebody with dogs. I mean, you never know again. Yeah. But, I at least feel like if I'm running with my dogs as well, it's another kind of like deterrent. And then you can obviously get pepper spray and run with pepper spray. But it's really unfortunate because, running alone is, like I said, just such an amazing, freeing experience. And I think, every time I'm on the trails by myself, I'm just like, whoo, like it's, that's my temple, and it's sad that we have to balance those risks. And I mean, especially as women. So anyone can get attacked, right? But I mean, I think as women, you think the worst case scenario, you don't want to get raped and you don't want to, be physically harmed. So I think, that's definitely, And
talk to me. I mean, I think it's definitely gotten better, but historically, trail running's been very male dominated. And it's, as I said, it's gotten better. But, talk to me a bit about that and about, the equal representation, things like, the prize money, things like that. And what you've kind of experienced.
Yeah. So I think obviously representation is key. And if you don't see yourself represented in a space, it becomes a lot harder for you to dream and envisage yourself doing that activity. So in the case of running, if we look back to the 1960s when women were told you can't partake in ultra marathons, it's physically not possible. We've come a long way since there. I mean, if you look at what women are accomplishing in the ultra running scene, it's absolutely incredible. Jasmine, with the Berkeley Marathon, one of 20 finishers, the first woman ever to complete that race. Courtney Dauwalter, the trail queen, the trail goddess. She cleans up and she beats men. She takes men. She finishes a race like 24 hours before the first man. So it's really, really incredible to see the sport diversifying and including more women. I still think from a representation standpoint, there are inequities, so who do you see represented? And maybe it's not people of all ethnicities. Maybe it's not people from all walks of life. And again, that's important, right? So if I'm a young girl and I'm aspiring to become an athlete and I'm only looking up to white men or white women, but I'm a Black girl, it's going to be a lot harder for me to say, oh, there's me. I can see myself doing that. Future me would be doing that. So I think, again, it's really, really important that we have full representation in these spaces. Women in leadership roles that can help influence and create that vision and that change within the space. So I think, yes, we do have more women in the trail running community, and we have more women partaking in the sport, but I would like to see more women in leadership roles of all ethnicities and more women that are, ambassadors for different brands, because I still do feel like when you look at that kind of pool, you see a lot more stigma towards women. For example, if you get pregnant and you have a baby, then it's like, oh, you're ousted, Some brands do that, And so obviously there's still space for improvement there, I think, in order for the sport to be fully diversified and for women to be fully represented.
And I guess, conversely, and, I suppose having less women involved in trail running, this kind of happens. Whereas there's a lot of men and it's men of every shape and size. How do you kind of deal with that kind of the body image? And, if you're going to be a woman in trail running, you need to look like this, you need to there's a certain look that you have to have or certain clothes you have to wear or things like that. How do you kind of deal with that and what issues, deal with around that?
Yeah. So I think it definitely goes back into the representation aspect. So, I mean, not everybody is going to be a Victoria's Secret sports model, and okay, I'm saying that like very broadly, but who do you see represented? So if you're only ever seeing, a thin woman who, looks like she hardly ever eats. I mean, okay, granted, like sometimes trail runners are thin because they're running a lot, but it's very important. So there's this one person on social media that I follow, Callie Vinson. She's a Native American. She's preparing for Cocodona 250 mile, and she lost 200 pounds. Sure. And she is all about body positivity and believing in yourself and setting your dreams and accomplishing them. I mean, she went from being somebody that was, obese to now somebody who does ultra marathons. And she creates a lot of content showing what her body looks like, right? And appreciating her body, because it's incredible that we can do all these things with our bodies. And, if we only ever see like people that have an athletic build and they're muscular and they've got 6-pack abs and it's not the reality. Yeah. That's also not going to create an image of, oh, that's me. Because, last night I ate like 20 Reese's Pieces and I woke up this morning and my stomach's like... Yeah. So I think, again, kind of seeing yourself in that space and having people that have those real conversations is so important. And I always love her content because she is the real runner. She is the real person. She's not, your test tube, I only ever eat this or that and everything's healthy. I mean, I like Courtney as well because oftentimes she'll just say, okay, I ate like 20 Big Macs or, like she drinks beer and she has nachos and, it's not like, okay, I'm on some regimented, strict, obviously eating healthy is important, but like, let's be honest. Yeah. We all have some nachos or a burger or some ice cream, and kind of seeing that represented and people talking about it, I think is really important. So I really love that she promotes body positivity. And I think, for me personally, growing up, I struggled with eating disorders. And I think I do have an element of body dysmorphia deep down inside that you're always kind of fighting and saying, no, I'm good the way I am. We're going to get cellulite. We're going to get, as we age, things are going to happen. We're going to get some wrinkles. And so, again, just having grace and being gentle with yourself and having people around you that are also real, not just, your sports model that looks like, I'm never going to be that, and then coming down to like balancing all your priorities. I mean, people are paid to look like that, so... It's not always.
And it's kind of extension of that, like how important are kind of support networks, communities, that type of thing for women, and having that kind of positive association, how important is that, to see?
I think it's massive. I mean, from my involvement in the trail community and with Musenberg Trail Dogs being one of the leaders, I think it's important that, it's not only men leading the groups, but that there's females and, you're encouraging other people and other women to get out there and do the same thing. I've seen over the years that sometimes I think women can be really hard on other women as well. And I don't know if it's a thing of like, oh, well, we've kind of made it in this space now. And, you've kind of forget about everybody else that's still where you were. And I've seen that in my professional space as well, aside from trail running. And I think it's just important to remember always where we came from, where we started, and to have more of a spirit of upliftment and encouragement and positivity, helping other women to rise. Obviously, if you want to get more serious about trail running, there's an aspect of competition, and a bit of healthy competition is good. But I don't think at the detriment of suppressing other women or oppressing other women or upholding their oppression. We're all women. We should all be working towards uplifting each other, towards, our shared successes within the trail community, towards a more representative space for all of us. So I think that's really important that we keep that in mind and we work towards that goal of, really uplifting each other and being positive and supporting each other to rise.
Amazing. And what other barriers, other than what we've kind of discussed, what other barriers do women face in kind of starting trail running or getting into trail running?
I think, obviously I don't have kids, but I think that is a real challenge for mothers, especially new mothers, because you have a child that's physically dependent on you. And I think if you look at kind of, even though, again, we as a society have progressed, women still take on a lot of those traditional gender norms, which, we're trying to shift things in society and make things more equitable, but there still is some inequity. So I think probably for some women, it can be a bit challenging when you have kids and balancing and saying, okay, like who's taking care of the child? Am I making time for myself, or is it all about my kid? And I mean, maybe both parents experience that to some extent, but I do think with the gender kind of inequities, a lot of that burden is placed on, burden. I mean, obviously you love your kids, but a lot of that is placed on women. So I do think that's probably another challenge that women experience. And I mean, obviously, just our bodies are very strong and they're incredible. But again, just aside from your period, being in tune with yourself and knowing about your health is really important, because there's other things that can happen. And, so treating yourself with grace, because you're not always going to be invincible. I think I learned that last year because I ended up getting diagnosed with stomach ulcers because of stress and anxiety. And, I was always like, I'm invincible and I can do anything. And, I mean, I guess that's for anyone. We just have to give ourselves a bit of grace and be understanding that our bodies are not bulletproof.
Yeah. And if you kind of were put in charge of kind of making changes in trail running, and what kind of things would you like to see in terms of, helping women get into it and seeing women in the sport?
Yeah, I really think just in terms of the representation, having more women from different ethnicities, different body types involved in the sport, involved in roles of leadership, given opportunities to be brand ambassadors, given opportunities to brand ambassadors of any sort, right? Because, you look at a lot of the companies and even then you kind of still see there's an inequitable divide between men and women. And so I think that's important to make sure that women are given that space and given opportunities to talk about their experiences. You might not be Courtney Dauwalter, but you still are, an avid trail runner. You have a circle of people that you're influencing, obviously, by being involved in the trail community. So creating those platforms and like we're doing today, a space for women to talk about their experiences and share them with other women is so important. I think also, there's obviously so many different trail groups, but to make sure that as well within the trail groups, there's diversity and representation among the leaders, So obviously, I think if you're a new woman and you're coming to, a trail group, seeing other women and seeing women lead, I think is an encouraging thing. I at least feel that way for myself. So if I show up and there's only guys and all the leaders are men, sometimes I'm a bit like, oh, okay, is this going to be like, really hectic today? Is it going to be like a race? And is everybody going to be competing and trying to show off? And, I think women sometimes do have a bit of a different energy about them. So I think within those spaces as well, it's important. And I know there are a lot of groups, Stelly Shakeout, my friend Shawnee, she's one of the group leaders. There's women leaders within Tuesday Trails. There is Chicks Who Trail in town, which is a lady run, and basically I think most of the people that go are women. So it's amazing that that this is happening within the space. Yeah. I think it's really important.
And you've mentioned some, but who are kind of the influential women that you kind of look up to?
Yeah, so obviously Courtney, I'm always just blown away by her performance and her successes. And I've always felt that connection of she's more of a real person. I think this is also pretty embarrassing because I saw her at UTCT and I was like, I'm also an American. And then I was like, why did you say that?
Yeah.
It was like, you get that star moment where you're like super excited and then you say something really dumb. And Callie, I've really enjoyed following her on social media. Would be somebody I'd love to meet because I just generally love her energy and her positivity around, just staying focused on your goals and your targets. And even if, you start here, you can make it somewhere you never thought you would. And so, yeah, just setting those short-term goals and obviously working towards your successes. I love all that she promotes. And then another person that I've really looked up to within South Africa is my friend Nonhla. She's based in Joburg, and she's done a ton of 100-mile races. And, you know, being a person who's really underrepresented within the space, a Black woman within trail running, I mean, there's not many Black women that are, you know, engaging in this sport. You know, she shows up in a space where she's always underrepresented, and she's always crushing it, and she's the most positive person. And, you know, her attitude towards, you know, running generally is just always really positive. You know, you're going to have these crazy experiences. She tells me about her time out on the trails, and she's like, one moment I was vomiting, the next moment I was running and I was going, and, you know, she'll just tell you these crazy stories. And I'm like, girl, that doesn't sound fun. But she makes it through, and then she has a big smile on her face, and, you know, it's just like really positive to see somebody like that engaging in the sport, because I also think for her, you know, she has the ability to impact so many people in her community, and, you know, young women who are looking up and saying, okay, is this possible for me? You know, she's a beacon of hope and an icon, and, you know, shows people what's possible. So I really have, I met her at UTD actually that year. I almost got struck by lightning on the top of the mountain. And I just saw her, and I went up to her and started chatting, and she was like, no, she's doing the 100K. And I was like, oh my word, like maybe one day I'll be that good. Now I've started doing 100Ks, but yeah. So I think she's a big inspiration for me.
Yeah. And you know, talk a bit more about like the importance of kind of mentorship, being a mentor, you know, having a mentor. Obviously, you know, I kind of advocate a lot in general in trail running, like always get a coach, no matter how new you are, or no matter, you know, even if you think you don't need one. And how important is that in terms of having, you know, a woman coach, a woman mentor? You know, talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah. So I've started coaching with Taryn this year. Prior, I had a male coach. And I think generally for me, having a coach is really, really important, because they help you to grow in ways that you don't realize you need growth in. Or in areas that you didn't realize you needed growth in. And I think generally Taryn's approach to coaching is very holistic. They obviously provide you with training plans, with strength workouts, but they also talk about, you know, barriers to consistency. They talk about the mental aspects. They talk about nutrition. They talk about hydration, you know, so it's pretty all encompassing in terms of the training package that you get offered. And I think, obviously, you know, you can I hold myself accountable, but having somebody else who's also there, who's advising you. Because, I mean, if I had never signed up for training with Taryn, I would not know half the things that I've learned in a very short span of time from January to now. You know, just around the importance of nutrition and hydration, and, you know, being more conscious of your body, because we look at our heart rate and we run based on heart rate and our feeling on a run. And it's just these little things that help you to kind of hone your performance and make you more in tune with your body. So I think having somebody who, I mean, not everybody might use that same approach to training. Different coaches are, you know, have different methodologies, but I've found this quite helpful. It's made me more aware of how I'm feeling on runs, what my heart's doing. And then kind of when you correlate that to, okay, yeah, this run felt really good, or this run, I was pushing a bit too hard here, or you're pushing harder on segments purposefully, it's really insightful. So I think, you know, it can depend on what your goals are in terms of where you want to get with your running. And your coach can also adapt to what you want to get from your running. But I think generally having somebody you can talk about your long-term goals with, what you want to gain from the sport, whether it's just to go out and finish a race, whether it's to go be on the podium, whether it's to have fun in the mountains, you know, you can still learn a lot from that process of having a coach who's trained and knowledgeable in the subject matter. So I've really enjoyed the additional knowledge that I've been getting from having from having a coach.
Amazing. And if you were kind of to go back to yourself 2017, what advice would you kind of give to yourself?
Yeah, I think I'd tell myself, girl, you have no idea what amazing things you're going to do and, what amazing mountains you're going to traverse. You have no idea how amazing it's going to be. If I looked back then, if you were to ask me, are you ever going to run 100 Ks? I'd be like, it's impossible. I'm never going to do it. And so I think also it just kind of shows what's possible. And obviously your mindset plays a lot in that, right? So if you doubt yourself and you never go out and take risks, you'll probably not, move towards, move towards doing these things. But I think for me, it's been a really beautiful journey because obviously it's not like I went from, 2017 hardly running to doing 100K, but over the past few years, this journey has been beautiful to see myself grow and expand and find what I truly like doing in terms of running. I do think I like longer distances. You're running 30 Ks, you have to run fast the whole time. And it's like
exactly.
I'm with you harder.
There. Yeah.
Whereas if you go do like a 60, your pace slows down. And you have beautiful journeys in the mountains and you see like the most epic wilderness areas that maybe you wouldn't explore. So I think just the journeys that my body has taken me on has been really incredible. But I think obviously you have to believe in yourself and you have to, set your goals high and try to attain them, without giving it a shot. You never know what's possible. And I think, Jasmine Paris said that after she finished the Berkeley, you just dream big. Yeah. And sometimes, not all of your dreams will be a reality, but if you're dedicated and you work towards it, it is very likely to be possible. So I think it's been beautiful.
Amazing. And speaking of that, what is on the bucket list? What races? What adventures? What do you kind of want to do?
So this year I have a couple races lined up. I'm going to be doing the Chrome Refer in the Cedarburg in May, and that's just a beautiful race. I did it last year, so I was just keen to do it again because running in the Cedarburg is like hands down one of the best places to run in the world, I think. But then I'll do Puffer, and I have unfinished business with UTCT, so we'll see. I might not do it this year, but if not this year, the next year. So I definitely need to do that. But then also longer term, I would love to be able to partake in an ultramarathon in the States at some point. I'm from there, but I've never done any races there, and I've minimally ran trails there. So I think that would be a really big dream, as well as probably running in Europe at some stage, doing running in the Alps somewhere in some race because it's just honestly so beautiful. But another vision that I have is at some stage going to the Wild Coast and running the whole Wild Coast and doing that as a fundraising initiative. So that's been another thing. This last year I did a race linked to a fundraiser that was through the SPCA, and this year for the Puffer, my team with the Trail Dogs, we're going to start a fundraiser as well. And hopefully it's going to be towards, we're looking for an organization that would involve getting kids from underdeveloped areas, underprivileged places, to get out onto the mountains and run.
That's amazing.
So we want to incorporate that into our run. So also, the Wild Coast thing would be linked to a fundraiser as well. So I want to try to do more of that, give back and use my platform to be able to advocate for change or raise money towards initiatives, social justice initiatives, or initiatives that can, create more representation.
And 100-miler?
No.
Not on the bucket list.
At the moment, I'm just like, if it was a stage thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the Wild Coast would be about that over 4 days. But I'm not at the point that I'm like, I want to do a 100-miler in one go, because I'm just like, It looks hectic.
Yeah, no, I think you got to be a certain type of crazy to kind of do that. And like if I said to you, money's not an object, issue, like travel's not an issue, time's not an issue, what is kind of the one race or like adventure you do?
Oh my word. Well, I would love to go up Everest.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd be running that.
Yeah, no. Like,
I mean, Killian, I think, ran up Everest in some record-breaking time, but that would definitely be on the bucket list. But then probably running through some of I have gone to Everest Base Camp, and it's amazing, and the Himalayas are amazing. So that would probably be something that I'd be like, I'm going to Everest. I'm doing this. This looks amazing.
Yeah.
And then also going back to Patagonia, and if it was possible, just like running all the way like through Patagonia from Argentina into Chile, like do a loop somehow. Yeah. There is a race in Chile that I've had my eyes on, which is about it's an ultra. I think they changed the distance yearly, so it's 85 to 100. It's called Ultra Pain. I have had my eyes on that one. That looks really amazing as well. But if it could be something, an expansion where you go into Argentina as well, so Patagonia on the Chilean and Argentinian side, that would be so amazing because that's just stunning there as well. So, yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And tell me what you thought of the recovery milk.
Hang on. Let me take a sip. I've been talking too much.
You're going to have to take them home. Like,
ooh, very good.
Yeah.
Delicious. I love it.
Okay, well, you can take them home. That's for sure.
Thank you.
And to kind of end off, so I want to do something fun where first thing that comes to mind when I say various things. So first one is rain.
Love running in the rain.
Okay. Sun.
Beach.
Okay. Snacks.
Ooh, Cliff Bars. Cliff Bars.
What are Cliff Bars?
They are like Far Bars, but they're made in America and they're a bit bigger. And they're so delicious. They're my favorite. So anytime I know somebody coming from the States, I'm like, please bring me some Cliff Bars.
Oh, wow.
Smuggle me Cliff Bars in. Like 20, 30, let's go.
Okay.
So that's mostly what I eat.
Hills.
Sprints. Oh.
Nap.
I wish I listened to my parents when I was a baby and I actually took naps, instead of fighting it. Because now I'm like, I want naps. I want naps.
Yeah. Gear.
Oh, God. That's always controversial. I don't even know what to say about
What is the first thing that comes to mind?
Running pack. Having a good running pack is essential, I think. Reliable. And a quiver if you have poles.
Yeah. Views.
Oh, Chapman's Peak. My favorite. Going up Chapman's Peak in the morning for a tag.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I've never done that. So
you got to do it.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Hydration.
Have more. Have more. Have a lot.
Yeah.
You need a lot of liquid.
Yeah.
You need a lot of liquid.
Playlist.
I never have one. I never run with music.
Me too. Sound of nature.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. The sound of nature.
Yeah. High five. Trail mix.
I love the one with cranberries. I don't know, there's different types.
You
but
make your
anything
own
with cranberry.
like...
kind of. Sometimes I'll buy the nuts and mix it all together. Yeah.
Aid station.
I love an aid station that has good potatoes with salts.
Yeah,
potatoes with salts.
The one thing
you
it's
need
always
potatoes
missing.
and salts.
Yeah. Strava.
Crowns. Crown hunting. No. Okay. Strava is fun, obviously.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, ooh, I'm going to find a crown. But yeah. It's also cool because you get to see who's running and you learn about new trails and you can be like, I want to do that route.
Yeah. And lastly, finish line.
The finish line feels, I hope there's a bottle of champagne at the end of 100K. That's what I request.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and just like eat whatever you like for the next
Having a lot
week.
of ice cream, Kirsten's kick-ass ice cream, and a bottle of champagne. That should be at every finish line.
Yeah. And to end off kind of reflecting on this interview, I'm going to ask you again, who is Erica Holland?
Yeah, I think I'm a really enthusiastic person who's passionate about running and passionate about creating social change, being a part of that movement, and just helping to influence other women to realize that, we can do a lot more than we think we can.
Yeah.
Don't be your biggest enemy. Don't limit yourself. Set your dreams high and work towards accomplishing that. We are amazing. We are amazing. Despite what we've gone through, women always come out on top.
I couldn't agree more. But thank you so much. This was really enlightening. And I hope we can continue to have these conversations. I think it's really important.
Thanks so much for creating the space to have the conversation.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.